Afternoon and a good evening to everyone joining us from around the world. Welcome to Talks That Teach, where conversations insight, leadership meets learning, and ideas grow into impact. Today we are joined by Michael Humphrey, executive leadership coach, Maxwell speaker, trainer, and risk consultant, who helps leaders build stronger teams through self awareness, courageous communication, and cultural clarity. Michael, it's a pleasure to have you us on this platform, Talks That Teach.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Michael, before we dive into, you can say, in detail question, I would like to ask one question. You have multiple roles. I was just scrolling your profile. You have multiple roles. You played many roles in your life, just like a coach, a speaker, trainer, consultant. If you had to choose only the one that truly reflect your personality, what it would be?
That's a really great question. One role. I would say being a coach.
Right.
Mhm.
It encompasses so many things. You can say umbrella term you have used over here. That's great. That's fantastic. Michael, when someone hears that one acronym, I want to start with this. Later on, we will discuss in detail. That's this acronym. When I just came across this acronym, I stopped for one moment. What it means for me. When someone hears that acronym DISC, what does actually stand for?
DISC is an assessment, behavior, personality profile, and I call it a vehicle. It can be also used as a tool as well. And the way that it's very beneficial is when you think about DISC, D is for personality types that are a little bit more on the maybe dominant side, more decisive in their actions, a little bit more fast paced. I is more the person that is very inspirational, the person that is the life of the party in the room. And then you have S, which is the person that's very supportive and steady, um, and they're relational as well. But that security is very important to them. And then C, uh, being the person that's a little bit more conscious. They want to be very accurate. They're very detail oriented. And so, with each of those letters, two of them are a little bit more task oriented, and two of them are a little bit more people oriented. And usually, when it comes to relationships and interaction with people, the two motivators can sometimes collide, and that's where the differences and division happens because of the awareness not being there. And so once people are equipped with this tool and are able to decipher how they're wired, how each other are wired, then that's where the understanding can come, and that's where clear communication can happen. Yeah.
Right. I love that point. It's a wonderful thing. You can say the great acronym. I will try to apply in my life as well. Michael, why is self awareness vital to effective leadership?
Self-awareness.
Yes.
And I think the biggest reason I think that self-awareness is so important is that it starts inside before it shows up outside. Honestly, if a leader doesn't understand their own triggers, their own communication style preferences, their strengths, or even blind spots, they end up leading reactively instead of intentionally. The self-awareness it creates is it creates a pause between the stimulus and the response, right? Because in that pause, because you have the awareness, You're able to gain the ability to choose how you communicate. You're able to respond better to pressure versus being reactive. You're able to influence others in more of an intentional and more positive way versus maybe a negative and reactionary way. I found that just without the self-awareness, leadership becomes accidental. But with the self-awareness, it
Yes.
becomes very intentional.
Right.
And that's what we want to be. We want to be intentional in the things that we do and say and how we lead. Because ultimately we're impacting lives, and sometimes lives, the ripple effects of the ripples that we will never, ever see. But it all starts with our response and being aware of that.
Right. It really resonates with the book that has written by Goldman, Emotional Intelligence as well. As you said, it makes us more proactive rather than reactive. And in this context, self-awareness leads can foster trust. It can foster trust in this way. Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful point that you have shared with me. When leaders aren't aware of their own blind spots, they risk unknowingly impacting their team. What are some common blind spots that leaders have that affect their teams?
I would say the blind spots that show up consistently when I work with leaders is one, the area of communication. I'll say that for sure. Um, and the reason being is that many leaders, and I'll say we, we as leaders assume that everyone processes information the same way we do. You know, they may be clear in their own mind. I may think that what I'm saying is very clear and concise because it's the way I receive and communicate information. But the team may actually need more context, more clarity, or they just may have a different communication style in general, just overall. And they misunderstanding the direction. And so then that's where the communication happens. But in order to get to understanding that it's miscommunication, you have to get through all the frustrations, all the churn. And so, but the biggest thing I found is definitely first the blind spot in your communication style. And that's where understanding your behaviors definitely comes into play. The second thing I would say is expectations. High performers usually often, especially high paced, fast paced environments, they move quickly. And right now, that's what the world is. If you're not moving fast enough, you're getting behind. And so it's assuming that others see the same priorities the way that you do. But if the expectations aren't clearly communicated, people end up working hard in the wrong direction. And sometimes what we think is a expectation is actually a standard. And this is something that I had to learn through my own journey, is that standards is all about me, my values, my principles, and how I operate. Expectations is actually something that the other person has to choose. And so lots of times as leaders, because we're wired a certain way, because we perform a certain way, we expect, right, the other person to do the same way, do things the same way, where the value in being an individual and being unique, understanding each other's powers, each other's strengths, each other's weaknesses, and working with each other's strengths. That's where we can understand that there may be more than one way to go about this, but let me understand and respect, right, give space in order so that there is an understanding at least of the outcome that's needed, and the means to get there can be different, but as long as we have a baseline of understanding. And then the third thing I would say is what's really probably a lot of issues is managing versus leading. And lots of times people who perform really well are the ones that get promoted, right? Whereas we know that when it comes to so that's not just focusing on the task and the outcomes, but it actually requires coaching people. 70% of engagement, feeling connected to the vision, to the task, to the, it's based upon the leader's ability to engage. So if you're used to just tasks and outcomes, but not knowing how to coach and develop people, that's going to create tension that could be avoided. So just asking questions, just helping individuals think, guiding their growth rather than just trying to direct them in what you want them to do and how you would do it. Um, that's important. That most of us as leaders, those three common blind spots is what I'm seeing among the leaders and my clients currently. Is that it's just that lack of awareness in those three areas.
I love that perspective of yours. Michael, you have just, you can say, mentioned two things, managing and leading.
Yeah.
They are two different things. Do you think these are two different things and how they are quite different from one another? Sometimes people merge them and think both of them, you can say, one thing.
Absolutely. They're two very different things for sure.
And if you like to share a few, you can more ideas how leadership is different from management.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the question. Yes. When it comes to management, again, it's in the as far as the task and outcomes, right? It's very direct. It's very rigid. There's usually a very familiar and direct approach, right? But when it comes to leading, and as John Maxwell says, right, leadership is all about influence. Influencing means that you're having to guide, right? Having to do something that's a little bit of a response to whatever's going on. So not necessarily mean that you have all the answers. Like there are issues that come up as well, and so you're going to have to be able to guide the challenges that come along the way. Um, and it's not more so of a managed task, an outcome. You're going to have to actually do something different to where you're going to have to develop. You're going to have to empower, and it's going to require you to connect, right? And that's the biggest thing is trying to connect with individuals. Where manage, you can manage from afar, but to lead, you actually have to be a little bit closer because where you need to press in and lean in may work over here and it may not work over there. Where managing is just more from a distant perspective. And so I found that in my leadership journey, where I really had to transition from managing to leading, is really when the issues happened, the challenges, when things didn't go as planned. Because it's easy to have a plan, it's easy to have tasks, right? It's easy to have a goal, but when you have the challenges of getting to that goal, where the uncertainty happens, where the ambiguity happens, you have to lead through that. Okay. And that's going to take your influence. That's going to take you being up close and in touch and connected. So
Thank you. That's awesome point that you have shared here. And many leaders notice problems but hesitate to sometimes to address them. Why do leaders often avoid addressing tough situations? Maybe they have some fear of conflict and something like that.
absolutely. And I think Patrick Lencioni, one of the leadership authors, says it like this, as far as which is also a form of accountability and putting the issue in front. And so when I think of the word confrontation, which a lot of leaders sometimes struggle with because of the negative connotation around that word, but it's really putting the issues in front, right? And so a lot of times it is I mean, it's exactly what you said. It's the fear of not being liked, damaging their relationship, right? And when you think about it, fear is false evidence appearing real, right? So that's a me thing, right? And so I, if I am really trying to develop, lead you, right? Leadership is about the other person, guiding, growing them, developing them, right? If I'm really serious about that, then I'm going to um, do what needs to be done in order to help you. And so that means I have to get myself out of the way and do what's needed for you. So me wanting to be liked, me wanting to keep peace, right? That's a me things, right?
Right.
Uh, avoiding the tension doesn't preserve the culture. It actually slowly erodes it because of avoidance, you know. And connection can't happen from avoidance, right? So you have to be able to connect to where they are and then develop them. And that's where, again, the leading versus managing has to come into play. So when leading others by avoiding addressing issues, first off, if you're in the team is going to
Mm.
and so that message unintentionally becomes this behavior is acceptable, right? Which is not going to serve the mission, the organization, the goal, the outcome that is desired. But a healthy leadership requires that there has to be courage, moral courage, to care enough about the team to have the honest conversation. And that takes integrity.
Right. Sometimes they try to harmonize the situation, but you can say the fosters a distrust and disintegrity or disintegration in the, you can say, the teams in this way. And what happens when leaders avoid difficult conversations? Sometimes they intentionally avoid it.
Yeah. Um, the first biggest thing that happens is trust erodes, right? Because what I mentioned before is if it's not addressed, that means that you're giving permission and it's acceptable. And so if that is something that is not integrous, people aren't going to trust you to do the right thing. So the first thing that goes is the trust. And the second thing is the standards, they decline. And the third thing I would say is the people who are doing what's needed to be done, the right thing, will probably get more frustrated, you know, and because they see a behavior that they know undermines the team, they know that it's not serving the mission, they know that it's not serving the goal. Uh, they're going to see that all of that is being tolerated. And so you're going to lose the people who are actually moving the needle for you. It's normalized. And so what you either say or don't say is what you're allowing, because some people think that if you uh, if you say something or if you're saying the wrong thing, right, it's not all about what you say, but sometimes it's about what you don't say as well. So what you don't say, if you're not addressing it, that means you're also allowing it as well. And so that's why strong leaders addressing issues early, privately or constructively, is very necessary. It protects the culture before the problem spreads. And you have to see yourself as a protector, meaning that if you don't do anything, you're leaving the culture open to erode. And so by you addressing it, by you putting it in front, again, back to putting the issue in front, you are actually protecting the culture.
Yes. And great leaders protect their culture of their teams as well as the, you can say, their societies. And Michael, for empathy in feedback and clear expectations, how can leaders show both kindness and accountability?
Kindness and accountability. I think understanding that they're different when they're actually not. They're not the opposite, actually. Um, Great leaders combine care for the person by having the clarity of expectations, If they value a person, then they also feel the need to address something that's going to impact them for the better. You know, if I know something that's going to help you, I should tell you, because that means I'm actually being kind and care. By me avoiding, right, by me keeping it to myself, by me not doing what is right, then I'm not showing kindness. And so I think when leaders approach the conversations with respecting the person, well, first being a person of integrity, but then respecting the person enough just to want to communicate to them in a means that serves them, again, back to what John Maxwell teaches about adding values to others, about connecting with other people, you know, having that clear standard. It actually creates a space where people grow rather than feeling attacked, because there's a connection there. By you caring enough about them, they know that you're saying this because of their best interests. And you know the old saying of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. They'll actually know that you're speaking, caring for their well-being and their development. And actually, that's actually where development happens, is when you know that you have someone who is here for your best interest and they're trying to help you get to the next level of your progression.
Right. Michael, you shared a great message. With this balance, leaders build trust in progress. That's a wonderful way you can say you have cleared my this point. And leadership at the home can be as a challenging as at work. How do leadership principles apply in personal relationships?
But I believe actually, and I would say this is something that I learned in the Marine Corps for myself. I've been part of the Marine Corps for over 21 years, and the principles that I grew to understand in the military are actually applied in my own life. And so for me, I think that leadership in general, leadership principles are actually life principles. You should not have to be different in one space and different in another space. It should be a congruent lifestyle. And what I'm teaching, I actually have a mechanism called IAS. And so that is identity alignment sequence. And in it, it really cultivates the principles that I teach. And so one is the communication. But communication serves in the workplace, it serves at home. The self-awareness, it serves in the workplace and at home, the accountability, empathy, especially if you're a parent or if you have a spouse, right? Because that empathy is power, because it keeps you in a state of curiosity, of wanting to understand, and that helps you ask questions versus take assumptions, right? And those assumptions are never good, you know, for us if we are coming in with our own thoughts versus really trying to understand the other person, the other side, the other perspective. And they're just as important at home as they are at work. In fact, I think the most important leadership role many of us will ever have is our families. I mean, the way we listen, the way we handle conflict, the way we model character, those things actually shape the culture in our home. And if you're not winning at home, are you really succeeding? Because those are the people that see you day in and day out behind the closed doors, right? You can put on a mask at work, but you can't put on a mask at home. And what I'm finding in these leadership principles that I teach, the IAS mechanism, it transforms you from a state of doing, right? Because a lot of us do a lot. There's a lot we have to do day in and day out. And sometimes we are doing so much that the way we come off results in a different experience from other people. But if we can transition from a state of doing to a state of being, that's going to actually transcend into the culture that we create at home and at work. So it's not just a professional skill, it's a way of showing up as a human being.
Yes, Michael, from doing to being, it's a great change. As you have been a military person, and there may be, you can say, the strict rules and regulation that wouldn't work in our homes. And it's quite difficult for such a person who have been serving in military and you can say they're applying the same thing at home, how you can manage it. It's maybe a marvelous thing. Just like me, I have, you can say, not any experience of military, but sometimes what we expect from our spouse or our family, there are some conflicts as well. How do you you can say try to be as being not a doing person over there? It's maybe you can say the mastery of something, the magic you have with you.
No, I think as I mentioned about being very intentional, and so it just goes back to the principles. Um, one being the area of the self-awareness. I think I said communication and the self-awareness, but first step was actually being self-aware. And on LinkedIn, I have a article series that I do weekly, and it's called the Authentic Leadership Series. And because that self-awareness only came when I began to be authentic, again, back to just doing. As a military member, we're just, a lot of times we're trained to do, have obedience to orders, and whether you feel like it or not, that discipline is created to just do. And so sometimes the autopilot happens. And for a lot of us, with our daily cadence, meetings, careers, parenting, schedules, you get caught in the same kind of cadence. And so, really, that self awareness of me really being intentional to be authentic, right, really brought me to a state of having more clarity about what's happening here. Because a lot of times it was here to where part of my story was that growing up, where before I could lead, I first learned how to survive quietly, right? So that created a numbing on the inside of me to where I was just did. And then the military teaches us to make non-emotional decisions, right? But that's to protect us from making impaired judgment calls. However, because I learned to be silent, I thought silence was strength. I thought that emotions were distractions. So there was a part of me that I was not self-aware that I was silencing. And so when it came to me having my intimate relationships with my spouse or my family, my children, me leaning into the authenticity of who I am and trying to really get connected to that awakened me being aware that, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is what needs to be changed. And so then I'm able to get more clarity, right? And then get to discovering my purpose. And so with those, I'm able to then understand my behavior patterns, and then open up to being curious about not just myself, but then, okay, if this is happening to me, what's happening to you? And so it's always being in a state of learning and being curious that I think, but first being a person of integrity, uh, that helps. Because if I really love my family, if I really love my life, if I really want to be a great person and really add value to others, I have to get out of myself and really look at, okay, how am I creating a positive or negative experience in the world?
It's an excellent message for the audience who are listening right now, or maybe you can say they, you can say, can have a chance to get this video over there. That this alignment that you have shared with me shapes our whole lives, and that's a wonderful thing that you have shared with me. And
Thank
what does it mean to you lead from inside out, professionally and personally? In, you can say that for both aspects of life.
you. Yeah, absolutely. Mm, leading from the inside out. So much of my story and how I've really created the IAS, the identity alignment sequence, was that my mess is now my message, meaning that leading from the inside out means your leadership flows from clarity. You can't give what you don't have, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. And so
Yes.
first, my first doing it wrong experience was me in clarity on who I was and what I value. And so it showed up in how I operated. It showed up in my responses. And so leading from the inside out, instead of performing leadership behaviors, you actually look like a leader. You're leading from a place of alignment. You know, you're not saying one thing, but the experience of you by others is showing something different. You know, there's a saying, a principle that I learned, that the open door policy is only as open as you allow it. So if you're wondering why you keep saying open door policy and no one's coming to you, that's time to do a self-reflection, because you're saying something, but the experience is different. Your values guide your decisions. And once you're clear on that, you can decide differently. You know, you can be more decisive. Your character shapes your influence. Your identity drives your leadership, because even when something as simple as corrective criticism, you know, when someone has a disagreement, when you are clear about who you are, the disagreements is not an attack on your identity anymore. It's just more, you're seeing it now as a different perspective, right? Because now you're able to see, oh, I see the value in what you're saying and how you're looking at it, versus you thinking that it's an attack on who you are. And so I think when leaders operate this way, people experience something powerful, and you can really sense when someone's being inauthentic. And so that's why I really believe in authentic leadership, because at the end of the day, really authenticity builds trust.
Right. As you said, that Maxwell said that leadership is all about influence. So if the leaders must lead holistically, from your point, I have got this idea that leaders must lead holistically in
Yeah.
such situations. And Michael, you can say that people have different, you can say the styles, and it may create some frictions in their lives. How does understanding DISC, your acronym, reduce friction and build trust?
How does it reduce friction and build trust? I think that's the part, understanding, right? Because if there is no understanding, that means there's a misunderstanding. There's a misunderstanding in the behavior. You're misinterpreting. You know, I'll say, for example, a high D leader may move quickly and speak directly, where a high S team member may interpret that as harsh and dismissive because they're a little bit more slower pace. DISC helps people recognize that the differences are just often style differences, not character flaws.
Yes.
You know, because someone who goes a little bit fast, like I like to use the northeast southwest analogy. Whereas the D that likes to move fast, you may have the one who needs a little bit more details, right, before they're moving. And so that means that together you're better, right? Because as you're going fast, the other person that's a little bit more detail oriented can make sure that the execution phase of how that's carried out can actually stay on track.
Right.
And so it's just understanding that when the differences happen, that it's not an objection and it's not a hit to your character, your identity, or to who you are. It's just more so it's just different, you know? And so when teams understand that, communication actually improves. And with this, the communication improves, studies shown, by 30%. And so that means trust grows. And when people learn how to meet each other halfway, when they learn how to work together, collaboration happens. What do you think that does to productivity? That
Right.
increases well, because now we're not stagnant. Now we're past the barriers of internal frictions. So yeah.
I think with this awareness, teams can thrive well in each situation, in each and every situation where they are. With this awareness, teams can thrive well.
Yes.
Yes. And what are common communication mistakes when ignoring styles? What happens in this regard if we ignore such kind of things?
Something I mentioned earlier was, we as humans, we like to, I would say we like our comfort base, right? It's easy if I can speak to you in a way that you understand me. It's easy if I can hire you because we think and speak the same way. Because that means I don't have to put any extra effort for you understanding what it is that I'm trying to communicate. Or if anything, I can probably speak less and you already know what I want. It's easy, right? It's comforting. So one common mistake is communicating the same way with everyone. Some people want the big picture first, others want the details. Some prefer quick decisions, others prefer thoughtful analysis. Leaders who recognize the differences, especially in the room when it's happening, they can adjust their communication. But if they already know their team and how they're wired, they can already be, I'll say they can already come intentionally creating the message so that it actually is received in the way that's intended for each person that needs to take from the communication and execute. So that flexibility is a major advantage in your own personal relationship, but also in any team and organization.
Right. It's incredible point that you have shared with me. It will be a great help for the people to understand such kind of things. And as we have spent 43 minutes and still we have 2 to 3 questions, we are going to wrap up our conversation. Though it's very, you can say, valuable for me as well and for the audience as well.
Absolutely.
What's one mindset or your habit a leader should start today if he wants to start right now or today?
One habit. I think it's simple, but I think it's very powerful, is to have intentional reflection. Just because the cadence of life, and I'll just use me as an example, there's a pull on me every day, right? I'm not only a leadership coach, speaker, trainer, facilitator. I'm also a husband. I'm also a father. I'm also a Marine and a mentor. All these things are pulling at you, and it's pulling for your time, it's pulling for your attention. And so I say that to go back to a first point that I talked about, is doing. You can get into a point of where you're almost not present because you're just in a state of autopilot of just doing, and then you become really reactive versus intentional. So by being by having intentional reflection, it helps you at the end of each day, and sometimes in, the beginning of the day is saying, how do I want to show up today? Which then at the end of the day you can say, how did I show up today? You can start with, what impact do I want to have? And today you can look at, well, what impact did I have? How do I want to show up differently today? How do I want to show up differently tomorrow? And so having that intentional margin, right? Reflection time, um, it's you having an intentional action for growth, because if we aren't being intentional about the growth, right, that reflection helps you become self-aware. It helps you to stay authentic. It helps you to stay connected, because the biggest struggle is not being present. Meeting, you're preparing for another meeting. While you're having a conversation, you're having a side conversation on the computer. Like, you see it all the time, to where presence and you being present in the moment and with yourself, there's a constant struggle. And so the intention to connect, because everything wants to be fast, the intentional to connect and reflect has to be a priority. And so it happens when leaders slow down long enough just to learn from their own experiences. And again, leading yourself well first in order to lead others well.
Right. With small habit, leadership grows naturally. And before you can say, I will get your message for my audience. Dear audience, Michael Humphrey, from the very beginning to the end, has been sharing one thing: how to reduce tension and foster, you can say, the trust from different aspects of life. And he has been, you can say, writing different articles and sharing on LinkedIn and different, you can say, platforms. If you want to link him, you can link him on LinkedIn, Facebook, and it's very valuable for us. He shares wonderful things. Just I have got one article right now in my email. I will study later on, and I will, sir, I will share you some feedback over there, because I have downloaded number of your articles, and I have to, you can read them, or you can say simultaneously, and with the passage of time, I will give you some feedback and my learning over there. And for the last thing, obviously you have discussed each and everything, but for the last moment for today's podcast, I would like to share you one. You should share with my audience one key message, if you can say relevant to this topic or other, what you like to share with audience.
Yeah, something that I would like to share with the audience. There's so much that there's so many options out there in the world today, and there's so many things that are pulling for us to do better, to be better, to achieve, to go after. And if I can convey anything to you, that leadership is not about having a title. I know that since birth we are being pushed to be active, to from academics, sports, get involved with clubs, and it's more about understanding the impact that your presence has on others. And so, as I mentioned before, when we have all these things pulling at us, especially where we're in the stages of life of trying to really find out who we are, what we want, presence is really important. And that's how you're going to remain authentic to who you are. And when you grow in self-awareness, courage, empathy, you don't just improve those things around you, you actually improve yourself. And by you improving yourself and leading yourself first, who you are will exude, and that will actually change atmospheres, that will change cultures. And I've made it now my mission in life is to disrupt, right, the comfort of the self-protection of being familiar, right, which shows up as really fear. A lot of times we're fear of doing the things that truly matter to us because it's maybe not socially accepted. So it's you fighting for who you truly are, fighting for your purpose, fighting for your true authentic voice, not adopting what your parents did, right? Not adopting what whoever is on mainstream titles, but understanding who you are, adopting your voice. And so there's so much stuff in life, and you may find yourself wearing a mask, right? because you're trying to prove yourself. You're trying to uh, look less incompetent. And when you're doing all of that, you'll find yourself achieving all the things that are socially acceptable, but then you're empty. And so when we are connected to who we truly are and are aligned to our purpose, we will achieve true fulfillment. And so that fulfillment can then show up as you being filled enough in order to actually give enough, right? Because if you look at leadership, when we're not leading well, we are searching, we are scratching, we're trying to find the means to preserve ourselves, right? When we're frustrated, when we don't want to have the hard conversation because we're scared, because we don't want to disappoint. All of those are internal barriers, selfish things, right? But when we are walking in fulfillment, we are full and then now overflowing and are able to now connect and serve other people in your full power, whatever. So I am wired to inspire excitement around a cause that serves the needs of others. And that shows up for me as disrupting the lies that keep you living beneath your max potential. And so that's why I'm able to go in and work with teams and organizations to help them overcome and go past the anxiety, past the stress. The stress will never go away, but how you choose to respond and show up can definitely change. It can definitely alter the culture. It can definitely increase productivity. And then from a one-to-one basis, I can help you move past the barriers, past the stuff, past the lies that we've told ourselves that keep us thinking that the life that we want has to be at a distance when we actually can get those things that we deserve and achieve that fulfillment so that we can then continue to add value to other people. Because when we're all connected, people feel seen, valued, and heard. And that's where the magic happens.
Thank you very much. In the, you can say that I really appreciate your precious time and the audience who spared moments for us. And for the next time, up to the next time, I say you can say the goodbye to all my audience for this moment. And thank you, Michael. You have spared a lot of time for me. You can say that approximately 1 hour in this podcast. I really appreciate your efforts. I continue to study your articles, and I will share your link on you can under this video so that people, if you they like to connect, they can read your articles. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.